My name is Maria, and I'm just doing a presentation of the paper I've been working on with Eileen and Orla over the last few months. So I've been working on a paper about parenting mental health in the PFL early evaluation, looking at the impact of parental distress on parenting and child development in the PFL evaluation. Okay, so just a quick overview. I've been basing my research on the 6-month results of the evaluation, and I'm looking at a subgroup analysis on mothers with poor emotional well-being. And specifically, the question I'm wondering about is, do distressed mothers respond differently to the PFL evaluation? Just a brief literature review. Literature suggests that distressed mothers should respond differently. The most at-risk families benefit most from early intervention. So some of the subgroups who have been found to benefit to the greatest extent from early intervention home visiting programs have been first-time mothers, single mothers, parents with lower cognitive resources, and families experiencing high levels of domestic risk. So poor maternal mental health can impact negatively on child development. It's through maternal parenting mediates the impacts on child outcomes. So poor maternal mental health is associated with delayed language and cognitive development, insecure attachment, difficulties in social interaction, and behavioural problems. And these kind of outcomes are mediated by mothers' parenting practices. For example, delayed language and cognitive development. If a mother is experiencing poor mental health, it might be more difficult to her to engage with the baby, talk to the baby so that the baby can learn language and develop in that way. And also, maternal depression has been known to be associated with insecure attachments in children and behavioural problems. So maternal mental health is an important factor to consider in evaluations of home visiting programs because it's known to mediate treatment outcomes. So some of the ways in which maternal mental health issues can affect home visiting interventions. Some qualitative research has shown that from interviews and talking to people who deliver programs like the mentors here, and they've said that they find it difficult to engage depressed mothers in the program, so it's more difficult to deliver the program to them. So the interaction of compromised mental health with the effectiveness of home visiting programs is mixed. We can see both positive and negative ways in which mental health interacts with treatments. So for example, in the evaluation of the early Head Start program in America, children of depressed mothers demonstrated better social emotional behaviour than non-depressed mothers. And Olds and colleagues found in his evaluation of the nurse-family partnership that the treatment prevented increasing levels of abuse and neglect for women with little control over their lives. So those are ways in which the program or mental health interacted in a positive way with the program. And an example of a negative way of interacting is that in the evaluation of the early Head Start program in America, depressed mothers receiving the treatment were more likely to exhibit increased parent-child dysfunctional interactions than non-depressed mothers. So my hypothesis is that the PFL program will buffer the negative effects of maternal psychological distress on parenting and child outcomes. So I expect that mothers who are distressed, they should have poorer parenting and mental health outcomes, but also if they get the treatment, it will improve their outcomes, and it will bring them up to the same level as parents or mothers who are not distressed. So I expect the treatment will kind of pull them up by their bootstraps, I suppose, to the same level as everyone else. So how do I decide who's distressed and not distressed? I've used the WHO 5 measure of emotional well-being to measure this. The WHO-5 measure is the World Health Organization 5-item measure of emotional well-being, and it assesses like emotional well-being. And a score of below 13 indicates poor well-being. It's an indication that depression should be tested for. It's not in and of itself a measure of depression, but it is a measure of vulnerability to psychological morbidity, and it's a measure of possible depression and poor quality of life. So a score of below 13 on the WHO-5 measure would be a reliable instrument for the detection of depression, and it would be an indicator to test for depression. So for the sample here, I measured, or I took at baseline, I looked at their WHO-5 scores at baseline, and those who were below 13 at baseline are what I've termed here as distressed, and above the cutoff, the 13 cutoff, are non-distressed. In the PFL sample, 40% of the sample scored below cutoff at baseline. So that's 43% of the high treatment group and 37% of the low treatment group. And that's quite high. That's a high level of poor emotional well-being. Just to give you an example, Orla and Liam here in the Geary Institute a few years ago conducted a nationally representative sample or survey of a nationally representative sample, and they found in that sample that it was 16.7% of people in that sample scored below cutoff, indicating poor emotional well-being. So 40% is quite high. So the outcomes I'm looking at child development and parenting outcomes, which I've just listed there. Parent cognition and conduct towards the infant, locus of control, stress, interaction with baby, maternal attachment, and child development. As I said there, the sample is divided according to mental health status. Effects were estimated by regressions with interaction terms. So I got 4 different groups. Distressed mothers in the high treatment group, distressed mothers in the low treatment group, non-distressed in high, non-distressed in low, and compared them. And I was specifically interested in looking at the difference between distressed mothers in high and low treatments, and I expected to see more effects among distressed mothers than mothers who are not experiencing psychological distress. So here, the next 3 slides are of results, and you can see here. So this is the first 2 columns: distressed low treatment, like non-distressed low treatment, distressed high treatment, non-distressed high treatment. These are the means and standard deviations. And in this column here, these are the p-values to indicate significance for the distress. This column is distressed high versus low, and non-distressed high versus low, and NS that is non-significant. So these are child development results. In the tables, I've just included in the tables where I saw significant results, and then here at the bottom I've listed the subdomains where there was no significance found. So for child development at 6 months, we found significant effects for communication. Communication is an area that I'm not surprised we saw effects. As I explained earlier, mothers experiencing mental health problems talk to their babies less, interact with the babies less. So if they're experiencing those problems, the children they have less of an opportunity to learn communication from them. So I'm not surprised that distressed mothers in the low treatment group scored lower. So you can see that low treatments, their mean is different from the rest. It's lower. So 53 is significantly lower, and it's when distressed mothers receive the treatment, it raised their score to the level of mothers who are not distressed. So I'm reporting, 0.003, it's in bold, so that would be at the 5% significance level, and I've also reported findings at the 10% significance levels, which would be trends. So for example, like when you're submitting to a psychology journal, they like to see things at the 5% significance level, and so that's what's considered significance for that purpose. But I've reported the trends as well, which means that you mightn't be able to report it in a journal, but it's an indicator of what's going on. So these are results for locus of control and stress. You can see again that, okay, so these are all negative outcomes. So higher values here are a bad thing. And you can see again that, okay, so 47, 44, 43, 44, it's like the treatment has brought distressed mothers at kind of the same level as mothers who are not experiencing distress. And control of child behaviour and stress cutoff were significant at the 5% level. And again, at the bottom, those are subdomains that were not significant. This is parental conduct and cognition towards the infant and interaction results. The thing I'm most interested in here is the interaction with baby results, and that was like at the 0.01%. That's quite significant. And this is an overall measure of how much the mother interacts with the baby. Some of the things we measure are how often do you play with the baby, well, dance with the baby, sing to the baby, nursery rhymes, how much do you take the baby out, how much do relatives visit you, that kind of thing. And if a mother was experiencing a level of psychological distress, then she's less likely to interact and like take the baby out. So I would expect interaction to be much lower, and as you can see there, it was significantly lower than not like, well, having received the treatment to kind of raise interaction with the baby. For attachment, so the condom maternal attachment scale, I found no significant results, and that's just indicated there. So overall, as Orla said earlier, it's difficult to see results at 6 months. Like largely in the results I looked at for child development and parenting, we saw more subdomains where there was not significance than we saw subdomains where there was significance. So there was more insignificance than there was significance. But at 6 months of age, we don't expect to see a massive amounts of treatment effects. So in the other literature I looked at, which specifically looked at maternal psychological issues in evaluations of parenting interventions, none of them reported 6-month outcomes. Some of them looked at 12-month outcomes, but the 12-month outcomes didn't stand alone. They were usually incorporated with 18, 24 and 36-month data as well. So I got no information on results for this subgroup in other evaluations. So there were some significant interaction effects for parenting and child development measures, and largely, as you saw there, all the effects I saw were for distressed mothers. I didn't, for those measures I looked at, I didn't see any for mothers who were not distressed. So it does indicate at 6 months that the program is having more of an effect for mothers who are experiencing psychological distress. And I've seen effects where I would expect to see effects given the kind of risk that is associated with maternal psychological distress. So the amount of results are few, but they are largely in the expected direction and in the expected domains. So it might be that the program effects may grow over time. So thinking about future research, at the 6 months, with the 6-month report and 6-month evaluation, we hadn't included WHO5 or mental health as a subgroup analysis, but in subsequent, for 12 months and subsequent evaluation points, this is going to be included to see the effects over time and see if the effect continues or what happens over time. So, okay, does anyone have any questions, comments?